Have you ever, walked into the lobby of a massive organization, like maybe a global corporation or a federal building, and noticed how much they love to plaster these incredibly noble words on the wall?
Oh, absolutely. You know one.
Yeah, like excellence or integrity, sustainability, and they are usually etched in this beautiful frosted glass, maybe brushed steel with a really nice backlight.
Complete with the water feature in the background.
Exactly. But then you actually interact with the organization, or maybe you even work for them, and you realize the day-to-day reality of that place completely fails to live up to those towering ideals.
It is universally frustrating. I mean,
Right.
there's often this massive echoing canyon between the moral language an institution uses to describe itself in the lobby and the operational reality of what it actually does on a random Tuesday afternoon when nobody is looking.
It drives people crazy. Like, you claim agile innovation on the website, but it takes 6 months, 14 committee meetings, and like 3 blood samples to get approval for a basic software update. That disconnect isn't just an annoyance, it is a fundamental structural failure. And there is a fascinating concept within a framework known as the Diamond framework that actually diagnoses why this happens. So today we are focusing heavily on an excerpt from that text, specifically Chapter 5, which explores something called the theory of opposites.
Yeah, and Chapter 5 is arguably where the entire framework moves away from being just another theoretical management model and becomes a highly practical, ruthless operating system.
Right.
It provides a diagnostic tool to prevent what the framework calls performative governance.
Which is a very polite academic way of saying faking it.
Exactly.
Faking it.
We are going to explore how a simple set of 4 functional pairings acts as an engine for accountability, keeping institutions, and even you as an individual from falling into that trap. Okay, let's unpack this. Because before we can look at the specific pairings, we really need to wrap our heads around what this framework actually means by the word opposites.
That's a crucial starting point. Because when I hear that word, I immediately think of hot and cold, or light and dark.
Right. Our minds naturally default to those metaphysical or philosophical contrasts, good versus evil. But the central thesis here is that inside an effective institutional architecture, opposites are not philosophical at all.
They aren't.
No, they are hard, measurable, operational criteria. They are built-in checks and mirrors that make learning and accountability possible.
Okay, so they aren't just mystical polarities floating in the ether somewhere.
Far from it. The logic is that each stage of an action you take must create the exact conditions by which another later stage is judged.
Oh, I see.
They are causally linked. You cannot structurally have one without the other.
So it's a bit like setting a New Year's resolution. Like, if I tell you my goal is to get healthy, that is completely vague.
There is no opposite end to that statement.
Right. But if I say I am going to run a 5K in under 30 minutes by June 1st, I have defined the opposite end of the goal. I've created the assessment. Because if I don't define that assessment up front, I can just, walk around the block twice in May, buy some expensive running shoes, and pretend I succeeded at getting healthy. But I have to ask, is this just a fancy way of describing basic goal setting?
Well, what's fascinating here is that it's not just about setting a single goal. It's about an interconnected, continuous system of governance. The text uses this brilliant mechanical metaphor of a piston engine.
Okay, so like a car engine. One side goes up and the pressure forces the other side down.
It's all about mechanical linkage. In a combustion engine, the motion of one piston moving creates the pressure that another piston must resist or absorb.
Right.
If one fires, the opposite one is forced to react. In this governance cycle, if any pair is bypassed, or if you try to game the system with vague language, the whole engine stalls.
Wow.
The opposite pairings force clarity where people usually prefer ambiguity. It acts as a structural trap for failure.
A trap for failure. I absolutely love that phrasing. So let's look at the first 2 pistons in this engine, where an organization's intentions are actually defined. The first pair is task and assessment, or, as it's described in the text, definition creates criteria.
The fundamental rule here is that whatever you define as your task automatically becomes your assessment rubric.
So they're structurally the exact same thing, just viewed from different points in time.
Precisely. Which means the failure mode, the way this specific part of the engine stalls, is when vague tasks are allowed to exist.
Because a fuzzy task produces fuzzy metrics.
And fuzzy metrics produce excuses. If your task is fuzzy, accountability drops to absolute 0. This is the exact fertile ground where performative governance thrives.
Right.
Imagine a municipality that announces its primary task for the year is to improve water infrastructure. I mean, what does that actually mean operationally?
It means whatever the politician needs it to mean come election time, right?
Exactly.
They can literally just paint a pump station, fix a single pothole over a water main, take a photo for the paper, and declare, hey, look, we improved it.
The fix is to ruthlessly convert tasks into smart outputs. Specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound with clear tolerances.
Okay.
So instead of improve water infrastructure, the task must be defined as something like reduce non-revenue water by 25% in 24 months.
Let's pause on that because non-revenue water is a great example. That means water that is pumped but never billed, right?
Yes, exactly.
Because of leaks or theft or broken meters. When you define the task as reduce non-revenue water by 25% in 24 months, suddenly there is nowhere for anybody to hide.
Nowhere.
You either hit that 25% reduction in that time frame or you failed. You have drafted your assessment the exact moment you opened your mouth to define the task. The metered baselines, the monthly loss reports, all of that is hardwired into the definition.
And this demands rigorous honesty. But defining a rigorous task is completely useless if you don't put money, manpower, and strategy behind it.
Which brings us to the second pairing.
Right. Once you have that measurable task, you have to plan. You need a budget, a schedule, a staffing roster. Interestingly, though, the framework pairs plan with reflection.
I have to admit, I tripped up on this when I first read it.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, because naturally, you'd think the opposite of making a plan is doing the plan, right? Executing it, doing the thing. Why is the opposite of plan reflection?
Because reflection in this context isn't just, sitting under a tree journaling about your feelings.
Right, right.
It is a highly specific operational audit. It compares the intended resourcing, the money and time you thought you needed, against the lived reality of what it actually took. And it asks why the variances occurred.
So the plan is the hypothesis, and the reflection is the grading of that hypothesis.
Exactly. Which means the most common failure mode here is making plans without documenting assumptions.
What do you mean by assumptions?
Things like weather contingencies, supply chain risks, or expected inflation rates. If a plan doesn't explicitly document those core assumptions it's built on, you have no way to test them later during the reflection phase.
So imagine a massive, multi-million-dollar corporate software rollout. The IT department makes a plan. 6 months later, the project is a disaster. It's double the budget, and half the staff has quit in frustration.
A classic scenario.
Yeah, if they didn't document their assumptions early on, like assuming the legacy servers could handle the new data load, what happens in the post-mortem meeting?
It just devolves into a blame game. You were sitting around a conference table guessing why it failed or pointing fingers at different departments.
You're just making up retroactive excuses. You're saying, well, the vendor was slow or the users didn't adopt it fast enough. But if you didn't bake a user adoption rate assumption into the initial plan, you aren't reflecting.
No, you were just complaining.
The plan is supposed to provide the exact raw material for the reflection to act upon. If those assumptions aren't logged in ink, the reflection piston has absolutely nothing to push against. The engine just dies.
But if you capture those key assumptions and decision triggers in the original document, then your monthly variance reviews actually mean something.
Because you have a baseline.
Exactly. You compare the plan versus reality, test the original assumptions, and update your strategy. That is the only mechanism by which an organization actually gets smarter over time.
But a plan, even a perfectly documented one, is just a hallucination on a spreadsheet until you actually start building the capacity to execute it.
Very true.
That collision with physical reality brings us to the second half of this engine.
The transition from theory to practice.
We are looking at piston number 3, which pairs develop with learn. Capacity building is paired with capacity growth. So develop, which encompasses your training programs, your prototyping, your systems building, must generate testable experience.
And learn is the mechanism of converting that specific experience into institutional memory.
The failure mode we see constantly here is development without pilots. It leads to incredibly shallow performative learning.
Oh, we have all lived through the pain of this.
Seriously, think of every mandatory corporate training module you've ever been forced to click through.
It's the worst.
You sit at your desk, you watch a poorly acted video about cybersecurity or new compliance rules, you take a 5-question quiz that a child could pass, and the organization checks a box in HR that says you have been developed.
But no testable experience was actually generated. The organization learned absolutely nothing about whether that training improved capability, changed behavior, or protected the network.
It was pure compliance theater.
The structural fix is that you have to build explicit learning cycles into the development phase itself. It has to be run a pilot, evaluate the pilot, and then either scale it, revise it, or kill it.
Let's go back to our municipality trying to fix the water leaks. You don't just buy 10,000 new smart meters, put everyone in a classroom for a day, and then unleash them on the city.
No, you train a small team, you procure maybe 50 meters, and you do a pilot rollout in a single neighborhood.
And then the learn phase kicks in. Because during that pilot, your team discovers that the installation takes twice as long as expected because the threads on the city's 80-year-old pipes are completely stripped.
Notice how that alters institutional memory. Instead of rolling out 10,000 meters, failing the timeline, and blaming the workers for being lazy, the pilot forces the organization to rewrite the standard operating procedure.
Right. They revise the procurement specs to include thread adapters, and they update the training to show workers how to handle the old pipes before the massive rollout.
The development phase was actually designed to teach the institution something it didn't know.
It's so logical, but it is skipped constantly because organizations are in a massive rush to look like they're doing something. But here's where it gets really interesting. We are at the fourth and final pairing, and I think it is the most surprising, maybe even controversial concept in the entire text. Implementation pairs with character. Action pairs with identity revealed.
This specific pairing is where the Diamond framework really separates itself from standard run-of-the-mill management theory.
I really want to push back on this, actually.
Right.
Because tying character to an operational output sounds incredibly cynical to me. Aren't we stripping morality out of the equation entirely? We usually think of character as a virtue. It's taught by your parents, or in a philosophy class, it's the noble words on the lobby wall.
Right.
But this framework treats character like it's a spreadsheet output.
It feels cynical at first glance, but it is actually deeply pragmatic and arguably more honest. The framework isn't saying morals don't exist. It's saying that in an institutional setting, character is not what you claim to believe.
Then what is it?
Character is the operational output of what you actually do under pressure. Think of the difference between a fire drill and an actual fire.
Okay, so the fire drill is the plan. It's the development phase.
But the real fire, that is the implementation phase. And the heat of that fire burns away all the PR language and exposes who you actually are. Implementation under stress reveals true capability and true values.
Wow.
Character is informed by slogans. It is made visible and continually reinforced by what institutions do when things go wrong.
So it's the ultimate diagnostic test.
Consider a construction company. If a project is running 3 months late and bleeding money, and leadership quietly ignores safety protocols to hit a deadline during implementation, that is their character.
Their character is not the safety first pledge they made all the subcontractors sign on day one.
Exactly. Their character's corner cutter. The friction of the implementation phase forced the true character out into the open for everyone to see.
Ah, I see. So if you don't design your implementation phase to have real consequences and rapid feedback loops, you get shallow character. You get a culture of sweeping things under the rug.
Yes. The text suggests you have to tie authority to clear responsibilities and visible consequences.
You enable early detection mechanisms so that when things go wrong, and they absolutely will go wrong, character is observable and corrective action is possible.
If a leader enforces maintenance discipline, even when it causes a delay, and those who cut corners are held accountable openly, that repeated cycle builds an institutional identity of integrity. Character, in this framework, is simply the operational outcome of repeated cycles of practice, feedback, and accountability.
It really reframes everything. Having mapped all 4 of these functional pairings, task and assessment, plan and reflection, develop and learn, implement and character, we can step back and look at the engine as a whole.
It acts as an immune system against that performative governance we talked about at the beginning.
It systematically eradicates the gap between moral language and operational reality.
Because when these opposites are allowed to operate honestly and create pressure against one another, the cycle produces real competence. It forces corrective learning.
You literally cannot fake it. You can't fake a successful implementation if the rigorous assessment criteria were hardwired into the task from day one.
No, you can't.
You can't fake reflection if the budget assumptions were documented in the plan. The empty rhetoric is immediately exposed by its structural opposite. No single stage is allowed to float free of consequences.
Which leads directly to how you, as a listener, can apply this. The source material essentially distills this entire theory of opposites into a practitioner's checklist. 4 critical questions you have to answer before you start moving.
Let's run through them. If you are about to start a major project, launch a new business division, or even just reorganize a department, you have to ask, first, for the task phase, how will we know we succeeded? Meaning, what is the exact falsifiable assessment metric?
Second, for the plan phase, what assumptions will we test? What specific environmental or financial inputs are we documenting right now so we can reflect on them accurately later?
Third, for the develop phase, what pilot will prove our capability? What is our mechanism for actual learning, rather than just checking a compliance training box?
And finally, for the implement phase, what will expose our character under stress? How are we designing accountability and visible consequences into the daily execution?
So, what does this all mean? The framework is absolutely ruthless about this. If you cannot answer these 4 questions clearly, you must pause. Stop what you are doing and refine the stage. Do not proceed.
Because if you proceed without those answers, you are just building an engine with missing pistons.
It might run for a little while on pure momentum or initial enthusiasm, but the moment it hits an incline, the moment it faces real stress, it will stall.
And you will be left standing around a conference table wondering why all those noble intentions didn't translate into reality.
It's operational geometry, plain and simple. Every task drafts its assessment. Every implementation is arranged to reveal character. We've covered a massive amount of ground today, looking at how massive institutions can use these falsifiable, auditable design requirements to stop faking it and start functioning. But before we wrap up this deep dive, I think there's a fascinating pivot we can make.
Taking this out of the boardroom?
Exactly. We've talked about this entirely as an institutional framework, a way to fix broken corporations or government agencies. But what happens when you apply this operational geometry to your own life?
It scales down perfectly, because ultimately your personal habits are just an institution of one.
Think about your own daily routines. We've established that character isn't just what you believe. It's the operational outcome of repeated cycles of practice, feedback, and accountability. So look at your own internal engine. What exact character is your current cycle building for you right now?
If your daily routine avoids honest assessment, if you set vague personal goals, and if you continually skip the reflection phase when things don't go your way, what kind of character are you manufacturing?
Oh, wow. That is a heavy question to walk away with. The engine is running whether you intentionally designed it or not. The only question is what it's producing. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. We highly encourage you to test these 4 pairings in your own life and in your own work. See if your internal engine is firing on all cylinders. And maybe the next time you walk into a lobby and see the word excellence glowing on a frosted glass wall, you'll have the exact tools to figure out if it's just a word or an operational reality.